I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. The Steelers won their second preseason game, and Kenny Pickett looked really good. Mason Rudolph threw a game-winning touchdown pass, and we got to talk about that really bad offensive line, as well as the other players who are playing well. We're going to break all of that down right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video. If you enjoy it, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, including our bonus episodes like this one. So let's get into it. The Steelers beat the Jacksonville Jaguars 16-15 Saturday evening. It was a good time to be had for all. The Steelers are 2-0 in the preseason. They face the Detroit Lions at Acrisure Stadium next weekend to wrap up their preseason. Now, there's lots of different things we could talk about because we saw a lot more of the first team on both sides of the ball, and I'm going to break down the line in a bit because the offensive line, there's a lot to talk about there, and it was not good. It was not good at all. But what was good was the quarterback play. And it's crazy how we've said that now for 2 preseason games in a row when that was supposed to be one of the biggest weaknesses on the team. I want to lead with Kenny Pickett. 6-7, 76 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, 2 drives. And at least 2 of his best throws were called back for penalties. What more needs to be said about Kenny right now? I'm not a person he's saying he's QB1, start him now. I'm not saying all that. But that man is delivering. If you were one of the people, and you know who you are, people in my comment section, because I see it when y'all do it, saying, oh, it didn't count last time. He did it against a third-string defense. Well, guess what? He was running a third-string offense when he did it against the Seahawks. And this time, he was running the first string. Go back and look at who was in there. There's George Pickens. There was Damontae Johnson. There was Chase Claypool. There was the offensive line. That was real, and he executed. He was efficient. And this is a big part of the reason why I liked Kenny Pickett so much when I covered him at Pitt. I admire great football players, and he was a great college football player. And I don't know if he can be a great NFL football player, but I know he'll be a focused one. I know he'll be a composed one. And I know he's going to come out here, he's going to study the game, and he's going to give you everything he got. And right now, you're seeing Kenny Pickett mold his game. You're seeing him improve week in and week out. When he first started training camp, he looked terrible. He was looking like he was running for his life half the time, didn't understand where he was supposed to go. Then as camp wore on, he got better. And we noted it on this show each time. It's like, okay, he is getting better. The preseason game, you call it out. And he earned all the hype in the first preseason game. And for just 2 drives, he looked like he supported that hype in the second preseason game. And it wasn't just dinking and dunking this time. No. If you're one of the people, oh, he just dinks and dunks. He was throwing down the middle of the field. He was hitting Pat Frymuth. He was hitting Damontae Johnson. He was moving the ball. And still no Najee Harris, by the way. Very good signs for Kenny Pickett. Now, again, it's different when you're dealing with a new game plan every week and you're adjusting to that in the speed of the game. That's why Mitch Trubisky was always going to be the QB1 this year. But they like what they saw. And I got to say, watching him handle those moments and keep, and that touchdown came on a 2-minute drill when he looked on point, understanding the moment, not freaking out, trying to do too much. When they completed a pass, and he was ready to spike it. There was a pass he completed to Pat Frymuth where several Jaguars players just kind of gang tackled him, but kept him up because that's the strategy you do in that situation. When they're in the 2-minute drill and the offense is trying to move quick, if you're a defense, you try to stall as much as you can. So don't bring him down. hold him up. If there's a bunch of you there, he won't go anywhere. And then he has to then fight through you guys to get to the ref to give him the ball, and that slows down their chance to spike. Credit to Pat Fryermuth. He fought through all of that. There was no hesitation, found the ref, got the ball to him. Kenny Pickett, quick spike. They're back in there focused. I really like the attitude that Kenny Pickett's always had, and I think you're seeing it more and more with how he's processing things. And again, the Jaguars aren't some super elite team that you got to worry about right now. They may get there at some point. I think Trevor Lawrence looked sharp, even though the only touchdown they put up came from a C.J. Beathard run in the early part of the fourth quarter when the third stringers were out there. But I really think that there were a lot of good things to be said about this game, and a lot of it came from the quarterbacking. For Mason Rudolph, 17 of 21, 127 yards and a touchdown, no interceptions, efficient, sharp at the end. And when it was time to run a 2-minute drill, I guess it wasn't a 2-minute drill because it ended at the 2-minute mark, I believe. But when it was time to run a game-winning drive, he ran that game-winning drive. He looked sharp, looked prepared, was able to handle the moment. And again, I've said this on the show before with Mason Rudolph, Steelers fans. I know there's some of y'all out there that don't like him, that boo him, that do all these other things. This is a guy who got knocked out by Earl Thomas, who got attacked by Myles Garrett, who got accused by Myles Garrett of using a slur. Didn't say racial. He just said a slur. Stuck through all of that, came back, dealt with 4 years of playing behind Ben Roethlisberger, and is now simply okay with the Steelers signing a quarterback first in free agency in Mitch Trubisky and drafting Kenny Pickett in the first round in what was going to be his first year to handle that situation. To say, hey, this is my team, this is my offense. I've waited behind Ben Roethlisberger enough. So Mason Rudolph deserves all the credit. He has not complained. He's not done anything wrong in that department. Now, he's made some mistakes. He had a safety from an intentional grounding call that was pretty obvious. As soon as he let that ball go, I was like, well, there's no one over there. Now, maybe someone's supposed to be over there. That was part of the miscommunication. One of those things that you don't know. I'm not in Jacksonville. I was here in Pittsburgh enjoying myself because it was my father's retirement party. We had a good time celebrating the old man. But I thought Mason still looked sharp in this one. And, he's after the game was over, he said, glory to God. I think he's carrying himself well. He's handling the situation well. It's just that I do think that Kenny's passing him. I do think Kenny's working his way to QB2. We'll see how Tomlin handles practice this week. And as training camp is over, they're done at St. Vincent, but they're coming back to the South Side, which means I'll be able to be back there because also I'll be on the South Side covering Pitt football as well for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So we can quickly talk about Mitch Trubisky. I know some people are thinking, oh, he didn't throw a touchdown or his offense didn't score a touchdown, so he had a bad day. I don't think so. Mitch was 5 of 8 for 60 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. I thought he handled himself well there. Also had a nice 10-yard run. I think Mitch Trubisky handled himself well considering the circumstances. And I'm still eager to see how this offense looks complete when Najee Harris gets back and they get a chance to build some chemistry there. But all in all, if you're a Steelers fan, you should be happy about this quarterback situation. And you shouldn't necessarily be trying to trade Mason Rudolph. Because some people say, oh, this is trade bait. And I'm like, maybe it is. There's a possibility it could be. But I still say if I'm the Steelers, I just look back 3 years ago and I say, man, we do not want to be in a position where 2 injuries mean we're just putting in some undrafted dude who never touched, an NFL football before, didn't even play in Division I, football like they did when they had Devin Hodges. I think if I'm the Steelers, I find a way to keep Mason and use him as your emergency option there. But either way, I do think that Kenny Pickett, you could say he's going to be above Mason Rudolph in that regard. I think, moving forward. Mitch Trubisky still QB1. We'll see how things go in this third preseason game and how players are given opportunities in that game. Typically in the fourth preseason game back in those days, when it was 4 preseason games, just a little bit ago. I say back in those days, like I'm 60 years old. I'm only 33, but but in all seriousness, I want to see who plays, because typically in the fourth preseason game, you wouldn't see the starters. You'd see all the backups. So I want to see, is that the case? But there's also been certain starters who haven't been able to play yet. Do they get opportunities? All that we'll see next week. But I got to get to talk about the offensive line. As excited as people are about Kenny Pickett and how he handled the situations there, we got to talk about this offensive line, because they were terrible. We'll do that in just a minute here, right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Don't go anywhere. So back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's dive into what completely went wrong with this offensive line, because it was terrible. And they weren't great against the Seahawks, but they were manageable. This was beyond manageable. This was terrible. They give up officially 1 sack in the game, which that doesn't sound bad, but there was a lot of pressure coming from a lot of angles. They were very fortunate that Mitch Trubisky was very elusive. He had some really good escapes in this game, and another reason why I think that he's going to win the start. He handles those moments very well. But you look at what the Steelers' running game did. Most rushing yards in this game was by Steven Sims on his 11-yard jet sweep. By the way, jet sweep worked us for a second game in a row. After that, it was Mitch Trubisky's 10-yard scramble. After that, it was a 7-yard run by Mateo Durant. And then after that, every running back, including Jaylen Warren, ran for 3 yards or less in this game. Jaylen Warren, 3 carries, 3 yards. Anthony McFarland, 2 carries, 1 yard. Borghi, the new running back that they signed, 1 carry, 1 yard. Benny Snell, 3 carries, -2 yards. Gunnar Olszewski, 1 carry, -3 yards. Kenny Pickett, 1 carry, -4 yards. It was a rough day for the offensive line, because they were getting beat up. They were letting penetration get through, and it was a problem. And what symbols to me how serious this problem could get, because I've talked about how, hey, Dan Moore Jr. making real progress. Kevin Dotson, I think that he was making real progress. But what's the problem that I see right now is that James Daniels is really struggling. And James Daniels was signed in free agency to be that guy, to be the guy that helped, that fixed this offensive line, that whipped them into shape, to be the leader. And during the OTAs and minicamp, he was the leader. At least when we asked the offensive line about him. Kendrick Green, Dan Moore Jr., Chukuma Okorafor, all of them said, yeah, that's the guy over there, Mr. James Daniels. And in this game, he was getting whipped. And there were times he got whipped in the last game too, but I didn't focus on it too much. Because I thought, like, first game, we'll see. But now you have two games of tape where you can see not good work from James Daniels, and that is a concern. Because now the guy who was supposed to lead your offensive line out of the darkness, now you're thinking like, man, is he more of a liability? Those type of things, that's worrisome. Because if everyone was looking up to him and he's struggling this way, man. And like, I'll even look back at what James Daniels did. There was a pressure that he gave up that was really bad. He looks like he's not establishing his hands with good punches. And this is basic stuff. And this is stuff that Pat Meyer has to get in with him. But when a pass rush was coming and he was trying to establish leverage with his hands and strike and put them in right places, he was missing. He looked off target. And that, to me, that's a little alarming. He couldn't get his leverage set with him. And that to me led to some big problems. But if James Daniels could turn it around, maybe he becomes the catalyst of the offensive line to get it together. But in this game, it wasn't just him. Dan Moore Jr., there was one pressure where he gave up a sack where, dude, you're an offensive tackle. Typically, if you're offensive tackle, say you're looking at me and to my left, I'll say, so I'm a right tackle. So to my left is the left guard. So to my right shoulder right here, if I'm the offensive tackle, this is my edge. This is, the edge rusher is trying to get around this end to get to the quarterback, and I got to kind of drop back wide and stop him from going out wide and around me to get to the quarterback. The sack that I saw there was going through him, as in he didn't go around Dan Moore's outside shoulder. He cut right to his inside shoulder and then just dragged him to the ball carrier. That was not a good look. And really, the offensive line didn't have too many great moments to speak about in this game. That is going to be a major concern for this season when Najee Harris is back, when they pick a starting quarterback, whoever. They need this offensive line to work. They need this offensive line to just be decent, just be middle of the road. And they looked like they could be that back against the Seahawks. They didn't look like that in this game. Now, being fair, I said this also in the offseason. When you have young units, and let's face it, this is a young unit. James Daniels is 25 years old now. Mason Cole's the oldest at 26. When you have young units, you have roller coasters. You have ups and downs. They can be very severe. But this could just be a part of, hey, the offensive line had a better game against the Seahawks. They had a rough game against the Jaguars. Maybe they pop back up against the Lions as they're figuring out how to be consistent. Maybe. But I'm telling you right now, if James Daniels is really the leader that the rest of the offensive line looks up to, and if he's not able to live up to that, I think that could deal some serious blows. But if he is up to that, challenge, if he does get it together, start figuring some things out, and hey, it could just be a matter of just getting back in tune with everything, then maybe he can be the right guard that the Steelers need to carry them into the next era of the offensive line. But I'll also say the rest of the offensive line, again, they all struggled. Mitch Trubisky was under siege. There was one of the pressures he gave up. He should have been sacked. He spun out, was able to throw the ball away. But they can't have that kind of a performance throughout the season, even though they came away with a win in a preseason game. They have to be able to take on a lot of different scenarios. And take on blitzes and block for Najee Harris. And I'm not seeing it right now. Now, again, maybe we see it soon. Maybe they figure it out. But this offensive line got to pick it up. That was a rough showing. No doubt about it. And if they play that way, it could get a little rough on some teams. But enough about the offensive line. Let's talk about some of the people that did well, because I think there were a few more of them than some people want to give them credit for. We'll talk about that in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We got more to talk about from this preseason game right after this. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. I want to go over other guys who did play well. We talked about the offensive line playing bad. We talked about the quarterbacks playing well. Let's talk about the guys who also stood out. I will say those top receiving core guys who showed up in this game all looked good. Pat Freiermuth, 2 catches on 2 targets for 35 yards. Deontay Johnson, 2 catches on 4 targets for 33 yards. Should have had a touchdown if one wasn't called back. Chase Claypool with the grab of the game, in my opinion. He was running a deeper route downfield. Mitch Trubisky made it a jump ball. He went up between some defenders and made the play. And it wasn't a touchdown, but it was a contested ball. It hung in the air a little bit, and he found a way to bring it down. And we just did an episode on Friday talking about Chase Claypool being better, and you saw the combat catch there. Good sign for him. Jaylen Warren may have had a rough day running 3 carries for 3 yards on the ground, but in the air, 3 catches on 3 targets for 24 yards, not bad. Tyler Snead caught the touchdown pass from Mason Rudolph that turned out to be the game winner. Benny Snell, another guy, negative 2 yards on the ground. But he didn't let that get him down. He didn't let that strain his focus away from his goal. Because later in the game, he's playing special teams. And again, Danny Smith loves Benny Snell in special teams, which is why I was saying I'm not so sure that he's the guy that's going to get cut. I know a lot of people want to cut Benny Snell because he hasn't lived up to the hype. But you see the stuff that he does and the things that he does in this game where he doesn't look fast, he doesn't look quick. But after Kenny Pickett's first touchdown pass was negated by a penalty, he's able to check it down to Benny Snell, and Benny Snell just kind of makes the guy miss, dives into the end zone, makes it happen. He's gotten sharper. He's better. That's why he's still around. And that's why I think that they're going to try to keep him around. Other guys that I thought looked really good. Terrell Edmonds, 5 tackles all over the place. Really, him and Damontae Kazee together looked really, really good. They looked like they could be, both had 5 tackles. They looked like they could be a team as far as safety tandems go. With covering deep, helping in the box. Terrell Edmonds was attacking like a linebacker. He was getting up in there against the run. He was getting in the backfield, attacking. I thought that was really strong. I thought Miles Jack showed again why he was so highly sought after by the Steelers with 4 tackles, a lot of them right around the line of scrimmage. Devin Bush at least got 4 tackles in this game. Still wasn't the Devin Bush that everyone's hoping for. But we'll see. Maybe that'll come in time. But all in all, I thought that there were a lot of positive notes for what the team was trying to do in this preseason game. And sure, there were mistakes. Wasn't clean. It was actually, there were way too many offensive mistakes. And I'll point this out because Mike Tomlin said this in the press conference, and he was absolutely right. The Jaguars controlled this game for most of it. But what determines a great football team is when you don't, is one being consistent and being great and all that, but and controlling more games than you don't. But when you don't control a game, if you can steal, if you can find a way to win the important moments and take and steal those away from your opponent, that's how you can build a winning resume in those situations. And this is an opportunity where the Steelers had less first downs than the Jaguars, gave up allowed 2 first downs via penalty to the Jaguars. The Steelers were 3 of 11 on third down in this game, 27%. The Jaguars were 10 of 20, 50%. That's a bad disparity that you want in that situation. But again, Steelers take advantage because they were in the red zone, 2 of 3 in the red zone. 3 times they're in the red zone, 2 times they wound up with touchdowns. Jaguars, 3 times they were in the red zone, 1 time they wound up with a touchdown. Mike Tomlin says situational football, though. A 2-minute drill and a game-winning touchdown pass from Mason Rudolph. A lot of that stems from 7 shots, situational football, the things that they're doing in practice. I think those things are shining through. Those are important parts when we're reporting on that part of training camp. I hope you enjoyed it. We're done with those because now that they're back at the South Side, we can't tweet nothing. But this is why they work on those things. This is where the coaching comes into play to show those moments. And I think you saw some of those moments come to fruition in this game. Kenny Pickett's 2-minute drill drive. Mason Rudolph kind of locking it at the end there. And Mike Tomlin even said, those are what we trained for. That was a lot of why they won last year. Even, without these quarterbacks, they had Ben Roethlisberger. The defense, they couldn't stop the run, but they could win key plays. They can get after the quarterback. They could maximize their strengths in ways that help them to win those key moments. And heck, in this game, 3 red zone trips, only 1 touchdown, and it was in the early part of the fourth quarter. They kept it. They kept Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, and Trevor Lawrence, who looked good in this game, from getting into the end zone. Again, still no Cam Hayward, still figuring out the full onslaught of the defense. But this was a team that found a way to win in a preseason game. Again, it does not matter, but they found a way to win in an exhibition game when they didn't control it. Their goal next week should be to control the game against the Lions. Again, this is a bonus episode, not going too heavy into everything. I'm going to have more evaluation when I look at more tape. It's really late at night, so I'm going to bid you guys farewell. I hope you enjoy your Sunday. I know I will. Check me out on The Final Word on Channel 11 WPXI, Friday night, 11:35. You can check me there. Again, I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Check me out on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed the game. We'll be talking more about it on the Monday episode right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. See you soon.